But if freedom from stress during handling is important to meat quality, so too is minimum stress during loading and transport. Adrian believes that his new system covers that part of the story too.
In terms of loading them, which is probably the most stressful factor and again would affect the meat eating quality the most, we bring them into the handling system and we built a loading ramp over there, and that has changed things 3 times over from trying to load them out of straw reeds with pole and veil gates where you're chasing them around, they get stressed, you get stressed. Loading them on the ramp, it has made, they just walk onto the lorry, shut the gate and off you go. The lorry driver will now come here and load them himself rather than virtually refusing to come here and load them. So it has made life a lot easier and better for the animals and therefore better for the meat eating quality as well.
And the importance of reducing or eliminating stress is true for every link in the chain, on the farm, during transport from the farm, and on arrival in the lairage of the abattoir too. The animals in the beef eating quality trial all had to have had high reserves of glycogen in their muscle. Adequate levels of glycogen are important for the development of the correct ultimate pH in the muscle after slaughter. Glycogen reserves can be reduced by stress, excitement, and physical exercise.
Stress affects pH. pH affects the eating quality of the meat, and a lot of the things we're trying to do are methods of controlling pH. One of the things you'll get will be dark cutters, which are of less value, obviously, than the type of meat we'd like to handle.
In extreme cases, poor handling or lack of care during transport can lead to bruising. This animal has a lump on its side. Once slaughtered, we can see that the bruised area has had to be removed, resulting in a lower carcass value.
Depending on the type of bruising and the depth of bruising, it could mean that we have to remove a part of the carcass, which will effectively reduce the level of payment the farmer gets for the animal by the amount of the weight that's been reduced. It's not perhaps as severe as it might be, because once you start cutting into certain parts of the carcass, of course you are reducing the value quite considerably. But that's really the main effect at the moment. What we're trying to do is work with our producers to minimise that kind of issue so it doesn't become a major issue.
Modern technology in the abattoir can help to ensure meat of the highest eating quality.
It is true that there are a number of methods of handling the carcass which will ensure that we are maximising the eating quality and the consistency of eating quality. It is my belief that all we're doing is making the best of the meat that we've had. We can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. And the systems that we use, which are well known, and if you like, were the original MLC blueprint, consists of electrical stimulation, hip suspension, and considerate chilling. And the combination of those 3 techniques will ensure that we have done our best to make sure that the meat eats well and is consistent. Electrical stimulation is a means of using up the energy. You're gradually changing from muscle to meat as the carcass is processed. By taking it through rigour, you are using up this energy, and therefore you are reducing the risk of cold shortening and dark cutters. At the same time, what you're doing is controlling the rate at which the pH of the animal will fall, the acidity of the animal will fall. What you're trying to achieve is a level of pH of about 6 through the process. Now, you don't want to do this too fast, and you don't want to do too slow. Electrical stimulation helps you to control that at the beginning of the process. Then you go to your hip suspension. And the hip suspension is, if you like, returning the hind leg to its normal shape when the animal was alive. So you get an L shape, and it changes the tension and the stress in the muscles of the meat. 48 hours afterwards, when you take the forequarter and the flank off it, you rehang it by the Achilles tendon, and you effectively are stretching the muscle fibers. so you're tenderizing the meat. Most criticisms of meat eating quality will come from the sirloin. There's something very wrong if the fillet doesn't eat tender in a tender way. But the bulk of complaints are going to come from sirloin eaters, steak eaters. And so what you are achieving with the hip suspension is you are making sure that you're maximizing the eating quality on that particular muscle. Then the final two stages of what we can do to maintain the quality are considerate chilling. That is where you don't bring the carcass down below 10 degrees for the first 10 hours, 12 degrees for the first 12 hours. There are the two interpretations of that. This again is to prevent cold shortening. Then the final stage is when you mature the meat, which is now most commonly done in vacuum bags. Now, maturation is really degradation. It's a combination of time and temperature to get the meat to the optimum eating quality. Go beyond that and you start to get gamey, if you like, rancidity, and you've exceeded the optimum eating quality. So by combining time and temperature, which is the real difference between us and what our grandfathers did, they did it all by eye, and most of the maturation was done at ambient temperatures. Now the technology is understood better, so by a combination of time and temperature, you can reach your optimum maturation. Now this may be for 21 days, or it may be for 45 days, achieving the same end objective by just controlling temperature. Each one does something, but it's the combination of them all that produces the consistent best eating quality.
One producer who acknowledges the importance of careful handling throughout the production chain is Martin Hendry, who farms with his wife Mona and son David on the outskirts of Stirling. Each year the Hendrys finish several hundred bought-in store cattle, and in 2002 they started breeding some of their own from a herd of 90 suckler cows.
There's a lot of satisfaction in it, but as I say, you have the word disappointment too. But at the end of the day, I think it's less haulage, less stress on the animals by breeding them on their own farm and taking them right through, which I think is quite important now too.
When you're sending your cattle away to slaughter, talk me through the process that you go through that day to get them away.
Well, it's the day before, because they like them in the day before to empty the cattle out. But if they're off grass, where the cattle are getting fed anyway, and they're usually fed in the morning, and you get them out the gate because they've been used to coming to that corner, and then they're drawn up and ear numbers taken, and then they're kept on water and straw for a day until the next day until they're ready to go.
So what sort of things do you do here to make sure that that meat is the best possible quality?
I'm a great believer in actually feeding the animal before it's fat. You know, if it's getting fed at grass, I think the percent better, and there'll be a better meat ratio on them. And as I say, the element of making them quieter to handle is a big plus.
And the experience of the abattoir industry has been supported by the Meat Eating Quality Project.
What we did find is that in our experimental treatment, where we applied all the things that we know improve eating quality, we achieved a much tighter distribution of quality. So we really ruled out some of these poor eating quality carcasses and got a much more consistent, high quality sample. So we feel that from the beef trial, the overall message is that by doing as many of these things right as possible, both on farm and in the abattoir, we can really ensure that we're hitting that target a far, far higher proportion of the time.
Now that the single farm payment has led to the scrapping of the beef slaughter premium, some would argue that the way forward is to push cattle harder to get them away earlier. But some industry specialists urge caution.
I think the biggest potential pitfall there is if you do listen to some of the advice, it would say push animals harder now and feed them more intensively because they don't need to be kept for 22 months. If you've got genetics which are going to mature early and lay down fat, then you could produce a lot more smaller dumpy animals. So there's got to be a lot of thought and care taken when deciding the right feeding regime for your particular genetics.